Welcome to the Credit Edge. Ideas on time and working for a living. Let's get started.
This is the space where we try to stop the relentless spin of the world, step back from all the noise, and just look closely at the invisible rules, the rules that are really governing the game of our working lives. Today, we are taking a long, measured look at a short essay from the Credit Edge. It's called The Price of Understanding the Game. And we're going to start exactly where the essay starts because it really sets the entire frame for our conversation. It opens with this simple, quiet statement. The price of understanding is the cost of seeing the rules. Wow. I mean, that immediately changes the whole tenor of the discussion, doesn't it? It suggests that this isn't about, gaining something new. It's about paying a cost. The often painful cost of recognizing what was there all along. We're not talking about complex financial markets today. We're zooming way in on the bedrock beneath our financial lives, the quiet, repetitive rules that govern daily work and spending for those of us who, by design, trade hours for wages. Our mission today is to slow down enough to truly see the system that is already moving around us. And we're going to be leveraging the insights developed in this essay.
That phrase, the cost of seeing the rules, it's profoundly important. It implies that true understanding is an earned status. It costs something. It costs something because it forces us to confront and, discard the comfortable illusions we've all been living under. It costs us the convenience of not thinking about it. For this deep dive, we're using the core Credit Edge philosophy as our analytical framework. We are looking for those hidden costs. And more importantly, how awareness, what we define as awakening, is the foundation. That's principle 5, how that is the absolute non-negotiable first step in reclaiming our time. And just to be clear for everyone listening, awakening is the foundation. It simply means you cannot fix, you can't change, you can't escape a system you haven't taken the time to observe and understand. First, you have to see the cost.
Okay, so let's unpack this journey of awakening. The essay doesn't start with some abstract theory. It starts with the most visceral, immediate moment in the working life. The paycheck. It describes that initial feeling of earned labor, that moment when the money hits your account or the envelope is in your hand. The source says the first paycheck feels like progress. You hold it in your hands and believe life has finally started.
And that feeling is the illusion of forward motion that the entire system is built to sell us. It's the reward mechanism for compliance. It's that little dopamine hit of income. But the text, it immediately moves past that feeling and into the cold technical reality of the financial structure that's waiting for it.
Right. It instantly undercuts that sense of arrival with the immediate mandated drain.
Precisely. And this is the first practical application of awakening is the foundation, principle 5. The very first awareness is seeing what isn't actually available to you. The source reminds us, and it's so pointed, it says, you already know most of it is spoken for. Rent, food, debt, survival. The progress you thought you made by completing your labor, it's instantly neutralized by the mandated structure of survival within the system. The cost isn't just steep, it is already priced in before the money even arrives.
You've earned a full amount, but before you can even interact with it, before you can make a genuine choice about where that labor, your labor, should go, the system has already laid claim to the majority of it.
And that is the foundation of this cycle of compliance. Think about those 4 categories: rent, food, debt, survival. Don't think of them as things you choose to pay. They are structural requirements for your participation in the market economy. They are the systemic expenses designed to consume the overwhelming majority of the time you just traded for wages. If you only focus on the positive input, gross wage, you're constantly misled into believing you're moving forward. All while the true mandated costs of just standing still are actively pulling you backward.
Let's ground that idea a little more. What is really being traded here? I mean, we talk about money, but the essay focuses on time. How much time did that sense of progress, that 15 minutes of relief when the paycheck hit, how much time did that actually cost us, only for it to be immediately claimed by survival costs? That's the ledger that's hidden from us.
That is time, is the only real currency, principle 1, in its rawest form. When you perform 40 hours of labor, you are trading 40 hours of your non-renewable life force. That's what it is. The money you receive is just a temporary storage mechanism for that labor. And when that money is immediately claimed by rent or debt, the hours you traded were essentially traded for the right to stay in place. They were traded for the elimination of immediate systemic threats, things like eviction, hunger. They weren't traded for accumulation or for freedom. The true price of that small moment of progress was 40 hours of your finite life.
And the essay then captures the psychological rhythm of this reality. It shows that even the small reprieve, That momentary belief that you have control, it's entirely temporary. It's systematically engineered to be neutralized.
It is. And the essay calls it out beautifully with that Friday night realization. That's where the cycle feels like a sudden, predictable shock. It says, when the direct deposit hits and for a moment you think you can breathe, then the bills line up like clockwork and the breath leaves just as quickly.
That word clockwork, it's devastating. It turns the system into something mechanical and indifferent, something that operates completely outside of our emotional reality.
It signifies how deeply ingrained these systemic demands are. This isn't a surprise, it's a routine. The moment of anticipation, that fleeting belief in choice, it's immediately shattered by the mechanical, inevitable necessity of compliance. The routine shows that the system isn't waiting for your deliberate choice. It's simply enforcing the preset pattern of consumption required for your survival within its structure. And the regularity of that clockwork routine is what makes the pattern so hard to see. It happens exactly when we expect it to, which reinforces this ingrained belief that this cycle, that this is just what life is.
Okay, but if that routine is so predictable, if the demands of rent and debt are like clockwork every single month, why do we constantly feel so unprepared for them? Or, surprised when the money just vanishes?
Yeah.
Maybe the problem isn't the clockwork itself, but the education we received.
That transition is critical. If we were taught to manage the clockwork, we wouldn't be surprised every payday. But we weren't. We weren't taught to manage it, we were taught to comply with it. This leads directly into the essay's core critique about how we are prepared, or I should say, deliberately limited for the system we operate in. The source says it so plainly. For us, the working class, we were taught how to work, not how to see.
That is just a stark assessment of our financial education. We learned the duty of labor, but we never learned the rules of capital.
It is the perfect articulation of systems profit from compliance, which is principle 2. Compliance requires limited instruction. If the system's efficiency depends on predictable labor, it has to ensure that the participants understand their role. Duty, work, obedience. But not the structural levers, not the rules, not compounding, not time control. We learned duty and obedience and gratefulness for the hours, but not the mechanisms of the game itself.
They explained how to be a good employee, but they never explained the rules of the ledger or the balance sheet. They expected us to follow the orders, not to question the system.
Exactly. We learned how to contribute value through our time, but we were never taught the rules of how to capture or retain or multiply the value we created. That deficit of knowledge is not an accident. It's the entry point for the system's profit margin. The system profits when we perform predictable labor and then immediately recycle the proceeds back into those mandated categories: rent, debt, survival.
And the essay just brilliantly encapsulates this state of compliance by identifying the repetitive motion that defines this blindness. It's the 4 steps of the trap, right? Work, earn, spend, borrow, repeat.
That loop is the fundamental rhythm of compliance. It's linear, sure, because you have to complete one step to get to the next, but it's fundamentally cyclical because that last step, borrow, immediately forces you back to the first step, work, just to service the cost of the borrowing. It's a constant loop designed to keep the individual moving, but never ever advancing far enough to escape the gravitational pull of those 4 mandated costs.
And when you're caught in that motion, it absolutely feels like progress. It feels like forward motion. Because, as the essay points out, it never stops moving. You're constantly completing a task, paying a bill, starting a new project at work, covering a payment. That continuous activity gives the powerful illusion that you're heading somewhere better.
And this is where we really need to spend some time synthesizing the difference between motion and freedom. The essay provides the crucial distinction here. It says, but motion is not freedom, it is the illusion of it. We have to recognize that difference because, look, motion is certainly necessary for survival. You have to move. But if that motion is perpetually governed by the needs of the system, always trying to catch up to the bill clockwork, it is not moving you toward autonomy. It is simply maintaining your position within the system's defined boundaries.
So we have to look for the signs then. The signs that the motion is serving compliance rather than accumulation. What kinds of motion do lead to freedom, and how does that contrast with the motion that only serves compliance?
The distinction really lies in leverage and choice. Motion that serves compliance is repetitive. It's unleveraged, labor-like trading the same hour for the same diminishing return. Working overtime simply to cover a new, unbudgeted expense. But freedom-oriented motion, that's different. It's motion that builds leverage. motion that acquires skills that decouple your time from your income, or motion that strategically acquires assets. For a working person, this might mean spending 10 hours studying the rules of debt repayment to eliminate borrow from the cycle entirely, instead of spending 10 hours working overtime to cover the interest on that debt. The difference is intention and outcome. The cyclical motion is the hamster wheel disguised as a ladder.
That image of the hamster wheel disguised as ladder it's powerful. It makes you realize that the moment of awakening is recognizing that you've been defining movement as progress, even when that movement is only serving to hold you in place while others profit from the predictability of your labor.
That's the core realization. When we are stuck in that loop work, earn, spend, borrow, repeat, we are constantly selling our future time to finance our present survival. It makes us incredibly predictable to the systems we inhabit. They can forecast our movements, our consumption, our debt service obligations with uncanny accuracy. And this predictability is the fundamental commodity that systems profit from.
This realization that constant motion doesn't equal freedom brings us to the core mechanism of control that the essay outlines. It's the system's dependence on our ignorance. It says every system depends on blindness. When we do not understand the rules, we follow them.
Think about it for a second. A system that has to constantly explain its mechanisms or use heavy-handed enforcement to ensure compliance is just inefficient. The truly efficient systems, the ones that govern banking and housing and employment, they ensure that compliance is internalized, automatic. They even make it seem morally desirable by the participants. Blindness is the quiet engine that keeps the wheels turning smoothly and profitably for those who own the rules.
And the essay shows how this is achieved through language. We take the necessity of compliance and we translate it into these emotionally weighted concepts, making it difficult to question. We rename the obedience.
We call it duty. We call it being responsible. This is such an astute observation from the source, it says. We call it duty. We call it being responsible. But responsibility without understanding becomes obedience. The system is leveraging our inherent moral structure against our financial autonomy. It relies on the emotional weight of responsibility, the idea that you must honor your commitments, you must provide. And it uses that to enforce obedience without ever requiring critical thought about the actual cost of that commitment or who benefits most from its terms.
But when you look at the system of, high-interest credit cards or housing that consumes 50% of an average wage, it certainly feels malicious. How do we reconcile that painful emotional reality, the stress, the long hours, with this technical concept of indifference?
That is the essential hurdle for anyone learning this. The pain we feel is real. It's the friction of being on the wrong side of the exchange. But the system itself doesn't possess consciousness or malice. If a machine is indifferent to the fact that you're standing in its way, it will still operate according to its programming, and you will still be harmed. The system is programmed to extract value where it finds it. Indifference simply means it doesn't care if you're educated or not. It rewards those who understand the rules of accumulation, and it punishes those who trust it blindly. Your pain is the effect of its indifference, not the goal of its malice.
That shift in framing it's really powerful. If we realize that true responsibility includes the responsibility to understand the rules, not just follow them blindly, we reclaim the power to question the terms. So what breaks this obedience in real life?
Clarity. Clarity breaks it. When you realize that the duty you feel is actually just obedience to a design that was never created in your favor, you stop viewing those rules as moral imperative, and you start viewing them as mechanisms of leverage. That's the point where the cost of seeing the rules begins to pay dividends. The intellectual price of awareness is paid, and the return you get is clarity.
Okay, now let's move into the quiet, everyday anxieties that the essay uses to prove its point. This obedience is rarely felt as some grand systemic pressure. It's felt as daily friction. The essay details these specific quiet drains on our earned time. Let's look at the grocery aisle, where prices rise quietly.
This is the hidden cost analysis made visceral. You perform the exact same labor, you clock the same hours, you earned the same wage, yet the purchasing power of your stored labor, your money, is silently eroding. The system doesn't need to loudly announce that your time is worth less today than it was yesterday. It just lets prices rise. It is the unannounced tax on your earned time.
And it creates that nagging feeling of frustration. You feel like you're working harder, but the result in the shopping cart is smaller.
because you are working harder relative to the result. If a week ago your hour of labor bought a full bag of groceries, and this week the same hour buys only 3/4 of that bag, well, the system has effectively stolen 15 minutes of your life back without asking. Your time has been devalued without your participation in the negotiation. This is why time is the only real currency. Principle 1 is so crucial. It anchors the cost of inflation not in dollars, but in minutes of life.
And this erosion just continues at the gas station, where $10 buys less each month. This is the relentless incremental loss that forces us back into that work, earn, spend loop faster and faster.
Yes, the erosion of purchasing power for necessary costs like fuel means that a greater percentage of your finite hours must be allocated simply to maintain the baseline requirement of being able to get to the place where you trade your hours. It's a self-reinforcing mechanism. If the cost of transport rises, your effective wage decreases, which forces you to prioritize essential spending, and that keeps you firmly locked in the compliance cycle.
And then we see the most direct trade of uncompensated time in the workplace, where extra tasks become normal.
This is the cost of obedience applied directly to your finite hours. The system relies on the emotional weight of duty, or being a team player, to normalize these uncompensated demands. The moment extra tasks become normal, they become part of the unspoken price of keeping your job. You trade time and receive zero additional financial compensation simply to maintain your compliance and your standing. If you refuse, you risk the essential income stream that keeps those mandated drains, rent and debt, at bay.
It's fascinating how the system uses our best qualities, diligence, responsibility, loyalty against us. It turns them into levers for unpaid labor.
It does. It weaponizes our good intentions. And all of this friction, the silent rise in grocery prices, the extra tasks, it takes a significant personal toll, which the essay also captures perfectly in the late-night thoughts that will not let us sleep.
That anxiety is the physical and emotional manifestation of the systemic pressure. It's the subconscious realization that the equation isn't balancing out, even though you are doing everything you were told to do.
Right. These late-night thoughts are not random worries. They are signals. They are the friction created when time is the ember. Only real currency is being exchanged unknowingly at a diminishing rate. When you're forced to borrow future time to cover present expenses, the anxiety is the emotional interest payment on that debt. The conscious mind might not have realized the systemic pattern, but the subconscious is screaming that the survival footing is unstable.
This friction forces us to look beyond our own immediate experience and acknowledge the entire structure of the game. Here's where the analysis takes a critical turn, moving from the individual experience of compliance to the structural divide. The essay says, here's the part the system never explains. Every exchange has two sides.
This truth is actively omitted from general education because understanding both sides immediately destabilizes the compliance model. We are taught only our side of the ledger: work, earn, spend, pay. We are rarely, if ever, taught about the counterparty, the side that sets the rules and collects the dividend from our predictable motion.
We have to detail the opposing roles precisely as the source lays them out. The essay defines two distinct positions in this market of life. The first side. One side earns while it sleeps, lends time, and collects interest.
This side operates under the rules of compounding, of leverage, and ownership. They've positioned themselves where their assets, capital, resources, intellectual property work for them, irrespective of their immediate physical labor. They are net lenders of capital and, critically, lenders of time. They are playing the game of accumulation and compounding. Their time is generating more time.
And then there's the second side. The other trades hours to stay afloat, borrows time, and pays it back with life.
And this side is constantly selling their finite resource, their life force, just to cover the baseline mandated costs. They are net borrowers of time, always relying on the next paycheck to service the debt, the borrowed time that they used in the previous month. This structural separation is the fundamental hidden divide that dictates the rhythm of the modern working life.
So if the system is designed this way, where the default path is trading hours just to stay afloat, why do most people end up acting by borrowing time and paying with life? I mean, who sits on the other side of that trade, collecting the interest?
The default path is seductive because it requires almost no initial understanding. It only requires obedience. The entire infrastructure of modern life, the quick access to consumer credit, the structured repayment schedules, the mortgage requirements, it's all built to facilitate this borrowing of time. It ensures that the work, earn, spend, borrow, repeat loop remains functional and profitable. The interest is collected by the institutions and systems, the banks, the creditors, the equity holders that enforce the rules of the clockwork routine.
Let's break down that cost. The source states the payment isn't just money, it's paid with life. That's the ultimate hidden cost, the one that makes the transaction irreversible.
That phrase acknowledges the non-renewable nature of our currency. When we borrow money, we agree to pay simple, or more often, compounding interest on that borrowed capital. But when we borrow time, when we take on debt that requires hundreds of future hours of labor to service it, we are literally paying back that debt with minutes and hours of our finite existence. It's paid with our late-night thoughts, with our lost weekends, and with our inability to focus on anything other than the mandated drain. The emotional, physical, and relational costs of perpetual compliance. That is the interest paid with life.
The technical imbalance here is just. It's crucial for the learner to see. Side one, the lender, benefits from compounding interest. Their resources grow exponentially over time, requiring less labor from them. But side two, the borrower, is penalized by compounding debt. The interest on what they owe eats up their labor exponentially, requiring more time just to stand still.
That is the structural genius of the system's indifference. It simply enforces the arithmetic. Compounding is the engine that generates value for the lender. And the inverse of compounding, the ever-increasing weight of debt service, is the mechanism that keeps the borrower in perpetual motion. The system is designed to accelerate the compounding of time for the aware and the consumption of time for the compliant.
This realization of the opposing forces brings the essay to a fascinating psychological parallel. It shifts the focus, drawing a link between large-scale market dynamics and our personal decision-making under pressure. It states, markets mirror life more than they mirror money.
This is a profound synthesis because it implies that the core drivers of human behavior are consistent, whether you're managing a portfolio or you're managing a monthly budget. The systemic patterns that create gain and loss in high finance are the very same psychological traps we encounter every day.
And the source identifies the core mechanics that drive both. Pressure moves people the same way it moves prices.
Pressure. Whether it's market pressure causing a stock sell-off or the pressure of an impending eviction notice, it forces immediate, often irrational action. The system counts on this forced reaction. When we are under pressure, we default back to that ingrained obedience pattern. Work, earn, spend, borrow.
And that pressure leads directly to the next point. Fear creates reaction, and reaction creates loss.
Reaction is the antithesis of informed choice. Reaction is automated compliance fueled by panic. In the financial market, fear causes us to panic sell low. In our personal finances, fear causes us to accept bad terms on a loan, or take an exhausting second job we don't need, or even just spend carelessly for a momentary comfort to relieve the pressure. In both scenarios, the result is a measurable loss of time, capital, or autonomy.
But the essay also offers the antidote, the counterforce to fear and reaction. Patience creates compounding.
Patience is simply the ability to hold your position long enough to make a calculated choice instead of a panicked reaction. It's the realization that you do not have to respond to the immediate systemic pressure. It allows you to operate on your own timescale, aligning your decisions with the mechanics of growth. This realization is central to awareness is reclamation, which is principle 3. When you see that the fear reaction incentive is deployed against you, both in the financial markets and in your daily compliance, you begin to break the automatic pattern. You recognize the manipulation.
But this knowledge is such a heavy burden for the working class because the cushion is so thin. We absorb the shock of reaction immediately. We feel the weight of these incentives on a daily basis. The essay articulates that burden so well. We trade time before we even question the price. We accept terms we never negotiated. We carry burdens shaped by incentives we did not design.
That trilogy of statements defines the absence of sovereignty. If you are forced to trade time before you question the price, you have zero leverage. If you accept terms you never negotiated, you are merely following orders. And the burdens we carry, the constant debt service, the feeling of exhaustion, they're not random. They are weights shaped precisely by incentives designed by the side that lends time and collects interest. They are designed to keep you predictable and compliant.
Which brings us back to the nature of the system itself. We touched on this earlier, but the essay reinforces the concept that we shouldn't waste energy fighting a ghost of malice. It's a technical framework we have to navigate. The quote is essential. The system is not evil. It is indifferent.
And that framing is crucial for long-term clarity and endurance. If we frame the system as evil, the fight becomes an emotional, moral crusade that is often exhausting and, frankly, unwinnable because the target is amorphous. But if we frame it as indifferent, the problem becomes a technical one that can be solved with clarity, knowledge, and structure. Indifference simply means the system operates according to its own rules without concern for the well-being of the participants who choose not to understand those rules.
And the consequences of this indifference are clear, as the essay states. It rewards those who understand how it moves. It punishes those who trust it blindly.
The path to freedom is not fighting the indifference, it's achieving clarity. The punishment for blind trust isn't a deliberate act of cruelty, it's just the natural mathematical result of being positioned on the wrong side of the exchange, the side that is borrowing time and paying with life. Once you internalize the indifference, you stop trusting the system to operate in your favor, and you start structuring your choices based on its observed rules. You stop hoping for fairness, and you start demanding understanding.
After this intense dissection of compliance, cost, and indifference, the essay arrives at its essential discovery, the central truth that unites all these anxieties and pressures. The source concludes, the game is simple once seen. It was never about money first, it was always about time.
This is the definitive shift. Money is demoted from the objective to the scorecard. Money is merely the stored unit of labor. Time, however, is the resource itself, the ultimate non-renewable commodity that we are trading every single day. If you are focused only on money, you're focused on the consequence. If you focus on time, you're focused on the cause.
This anchors us firmly back to time as the only real currency, principle 1. And the essay defines the entire game by 4 questions related to this currency. We need to internalize them. Who controls it? Who trades it? Who loses it? Who gets it back?
Those 4 questions are the litmus test for personal sovereignty. If the majority of your time is controlled by someone else's schedule, like that clockwork routine, if it's traded for diminishing returns, like those quiet drains, and if it's constantly lost to mandated survival costs, like rent and debt, you fundamentally lack autonomy. The entire goal of understanding the game is to invert that equation. The pursuit of wealth, seen through this lens, is just the pursuit of maximizing the time you control and minimizing the time you lose.
And the essay's conclusion on time connects the intangible concept of awareness to the practical actions we must take. It gives us a clear progression. Time tells the truth. Awareness breaks the pattern. Choice returns what work takes.
Time tells the truth, because if you look back at your last 5 years, you see exactly where your finite resource went. The hours spent working to pay interest, or the hours spent worrying about the mandated drains. The pattern of compliance becomes undeniable. Awareness is the intellectual act of seeing that truth, and choice is the physical, disciplined act of implementing change. You cannot simply earn time back through harder work. You must choose to reclaim it by fundamentally breaking the pattern of compliance.
So the hours you work, the debt you take on, the quiet drains that erode your purchasing power, they all point back to the central problem. Not enough time is under your control.
Exactly. When you are operating from a position of awareness, your choices are no longer reactions to pressure. They are calculated moves designed to maximize the time you control. That might mean choosing not to accept extra uncompensated tasks at work, or choosing to reduce high-interest debt aggressively to stop paying back borrowed time with life. That is the moment time becomes your compass, rather than money being your master. And this brings us to the ultimate return on investment in awareness. When you successfully transition from mandated compliance to reasoned understanding, you gain something that money alone can't buy. The ultimate return, and this connects Principle 3, awareness is reclamation, and Principle 4, peace compounds, is defined as sovereignty. The return of understanding is sovereignty.
And this isn't some theoretical sovereignty. This is practical, grounded autonomy in our daily lives. The essay defines what this sovereignty looks like in concrete terms, pulling it away from political theory and grounding it in reality. The steady strength of knowing where your time goes and who profits when you spend it. That steady strength, that's the opposite of the chronic, low-level anxiety captured in those late-night thoughts. It's the clarity of seeing the full cost, of understanding the entire exchange, and making decisions based on knowledge, not a panic. It's the strength that comes from realizing you're no longer playing blind.
It replaces the exhausting anxiety of ignorance with the deep calm of awareness that knowledge is the dividend. And the essay makes clear the gravity of this shift, that it is irreversible. Once you understand the game, you cannot unsee it. The illusion of motion as freedom is shattered. You can no longer pretend that the clockwork routine is operating for your benefit.
And the source brings this abstract awakening back to specific, quiet moments where the realization first sets in, where you realize you've crossed that threshold and you are seeing the system in operation. You first see it on your lunch break, in the 15 minutes that feel like borrowed time.
That feeling of borrowed time is your subconscious mind recognizing that your own time is conditional, that even those few minutes of rest are granted by the system's schedule, not controlled by your own choice. You realize the true cost of that lunch break is the compliance required for the rest of the day.
You see it in the overtime you did not ask for. That's the moment you calculate the actual price of that uncompensated labor, not in dollars, but in life. And you realize the cost of compliance has just increased exponentially.
And perhaps most painfully, you see it in the debt you carry from years ago. That debt is the tangible evidence of time that was borrowed in the past and which you are still paying back with life in the present. You see the systemic leverage against you. And while that awareness is painful, it is the necessary prerequisite for achieving choice.
It's the moment you transition from blaming yourself for being stuck in the loop to understanding that the loop was designed to trap you. And the only way out is knowledge.
The conclusion of the essay lands firmly on the idea of peace, and this connects directly to Principle 4, peace compounds. This idea suggests that peace isn't found at some mythical endpoint of massive financial accumulation, but in the sustainable rhythm found in choice. Clarity leads to autonomy, and autonomy provides a durable, compounding peace. This peace is the ultimate dividend paid by awareness. The essay closes with 3 progressive steps that provide the listener with an actionable roadmap toward autonomy, ensuring the challenge is grounded entirely in the source material. First, peace begins the moment you stop playing blind. That's the commitment. The commitment to acknowledge the rules and the costs. Second, awareness begins the moment you look. That is the active discipline of observation, of analysis, of understanding the clockwork. And finally, freedom begins the moment you choose for yourself. And this is the implementation phase, using the insight you've gained to break the old compliance pattern and define your own terms of trade, especially concerning your time.
Those 3 sentences, they give us the entire roadmap out of the cycle of compliance. It's not a single act of revolution. It's a quiet, progressive sequence built on conscious action. Stop, look, and choose. So if we accept the essay's conclusion that time is the only real currency and that every exchange has 2 sides, we have to leave you with one final provocative thought. What is the next hour you spend really being traded for? And what is the unseen price beneath your next choice?
Thanks for listening to The Credit Edge. Remember, your time matters. See you next episode.